Oh, good to see you. Just up the road, about 10-minute drive, there's Mandroy Falls. It's incredible. Let's get some fruit and check it out. All right, rock and roll. This hill, we'll head into the rainforest, Wooranoora National Park. Yeah, mate, it's amazing. All right, team, let's do it. Giddy, mate. How's that for a root? Like, feel that, how strong that is.
Fellow councillors, staff and residents viewing via live stream, good morning all and welcome. I acknowledge the traditional owners and caretakers of the land on which this meeting is being held and pay my respect to the elders past, present and emerging. There's no opening prayer today, so we move on to apologies. Are there any apologies? Take that as a no. The declaration of conflict. Please use this opportunity to make public any prescribed conflict of interest or declarable conflict of interest in respect of the items in the agenda. Councillors should use this opportunity to disclose and or comment on other councillors and or staff interests in accordance with the Act and the regulations. Are there any conflicts to declare, councillors? Take that as a no. Thank you. We move on to item 1, confirmation of minutes. Would somebody move that the previous minutes were true and accurate record? Moved by Councillor Pervin, seconded by Councillor Chewy. All in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 2, any business arising from the minutes? Councillor Millwood.
Good morning and through the chair. At 3.1 from the previous minutes, I just want you to confirm that the council did not allocate any further funding to the Cardwell Mountain Bike Trail, but we simply received the officer's report. Is that correct?
I'll refer to the CEO.
Through the chair, that is correct. Council have started having conversations with the state government to understand if there is any interest in future funding of that project.
Okay, and I've got one more. I just wanted to refer back to 5.2, where the Mayor made some comments in relation to Castor Park, saying that the parking is a big issue and this impacts on the public safety, and I just wanted to put it out there that there are other, if it's such a safety issue, that there are other alternatives which are safer. But anyway, just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Millwood. Any further business arising? If not, we'll move on to item 3, community and culture. 3.1, page 15, Regional Arts Development Fund, and Miss Hanson will present this report. Morning.
Okay, this report summarises the recommendations from the Regional Arts Development Committee for the October 2021 funding round and recommends 3 applications with a total value of $15,266. Is there any questions from the floor?
Thank you, Ms. Hanson. Councillor Pervin.
Yes, thanks, Hanson. Thank you. Quick question: how many applications were actually put in?
3.
There was only 3 submitted, were there?
That's correct.
Councillor Chewy.
Thank you, through the chair. Good morning. Yeah, just look, RADF is a very exciting thing, and some of these projects look great. I'm just wondering, Ms. Hanson, if you could expand on the Danielle Wilson project, because that is a big, very exciting project planned.
Yeah, that's pretty exciting, and I'm proud to be part of that funding. She has a very major production, Pan on Silks. So she's partnering with the Mission Beach Pool to have a major production over a couple of days in the Easter period next year. She's incorporating or collaborating with 127 artists across the region. She's working with Arts Queensland for larger funding to put this together. She's been a arts creative or arts worker in the region for quite some time, so that's quite an exciting project that's one of our arts workers is pulling together, and I would really encourage everyone, especially the councillors, to attend coming up in Easter next year.
Thank you. Just a few more questions. If you could just clarify, I'm sure, well, I don't know, other councillors, I can't speak for them, but I know when I go to various functions, I am often asked about grants that people can apply for. I know there's a community grant and the RADF grant. So could you just clarify who might be eligible for either and how they can go about the applications, please?
Yeah, the community grants are sort of overarching, so they cover environmental, they cover community organisations in general. So if someone's chasing minor maintenance and they want a kitchen upgrade, something like that, that's fine. But the RADF, the Regional Arts Development Fund, now that's a program between Arts Queensland and local government, particularly our local government, and that's specifically for arts-generated programs that develop arts and culture in our specific region. So there's quite a specific criteria attached to the RADF program.
Okay, thank you. And I believe you're having some workshops coming up to give people guidance on
so for both, with the RADF, there's a round coming up in March, that closes in March, and what I'll be doing in March is instead of having actually workshops where it's restricted to a certain time, I'll be placing myself at the local libraries, so that will cover the Innisfail, Wongaleen, Tully and Cardwell over the period of March. So then people have the opportunity all through the day. Sometimes times don't always suit, so they've got the whole day to come in and ask questions about criteria, concept, assistance with applications, that type of thing. So that's the RADF library sessions in March, but I'll be doing the same thing for the community grants. I'll be having library sessions in February.
Okay, thank you. And I believe there was a grant writing workshop at the Tully Grandstand, which was very successful. You had a pretty good rollout. Actually
that was at the Tully Top Pub. That was in collaboration with the Tully Support Centre. That was fully booked, very highly attended. And people were sort of lining up for the next one. So we, in collaboration with the Tully Support Centre, will be doing an annual workshop that covers everything.
Thank you, because I know people find that quite challenging, so that's great. Yeah. But they can contact you if they need further advice?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. And just quickly, I know I talked briefly on the Australia Day Awards, and I know some people, Councillor Barnes and myself, are not particularly tech savvy, so should we wish to get a hard copy nomination form, where can people go to for that?
We'll have the hard copy nomination forms at both the council customer service areas, but that also includes all the libraries, Tully, Mission Beach, Cardwell and Innisfail.
Excellent. And just one last thing, I attended the Festival of Small Halls on Friday night, which was great. I'm sorry that people didn't get to see it. I wish my daughter and her friends had been there, because I felt I was probably a bit old, but I still enjoyed it, but I know my daughter would have actually really loved it. So when it comes next year, I encourage everybody to attend, because it was great. It was a really good night, and live entertainment, it just has a mood and a vibe all of its own. So I congratulate you and the team.
Yeah, and I'd just like to acknowledge Ingrid Piper, our local performer. She was absolutely amazing, and she did all her own songs.
Yes, it really was. I had no idea what to expect. but it was great. So congratulations
Thank
to
you.
everybody.
Yes, so through the chair, she's a real up-and-coming star, Ingrid is.
She's fabulous.
I worked
So
with Ingrid, she's a nurse as well, and yeah, I
her
wish her
next
well.
step is
Yeah.
to record her own music.
Are there any further comments or questions for the officer? If not, would somebody move the recommendation that council approve expenditure of $15,266 for the 3 recommended RADF applications? Moved by councillor Chewy, seconded by councillor Millwood. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ms Hanson. We move on to item 4, governance, environment and finance. 4.1, page 20. Delegations, council to the Chief Executive Officer, and Ms Kerr will present this report. Welcome.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Through the chair, as per the Local Government Act, council is required to update its delegations from council to the Chief Executive Officer when amendments or new legislation has been passed by the state government. Attached to this report is the new Building Regulation 2021 table of delegations and the amended Residential Tenancies and Rooming Accommodation Act 2008 delegations. The Residential Tenancies Act delegations table has been track changed so that councillors can see what the actual amendments for the delegation to the Chief Executive Officer are. And through the chair, the recommendation is that council resolves to delegate these powers as outlined in the report.
Thank you, Ms Kerr. Any questions for the officer? Councillor Baines.
Just a question, Ms Kerr. This is really the changes to these delegations. These delegation powers have always been in place. This is addressing changes that have come through in the differing regulations and the differing legislations. Is that correct?
Through the chair, so the building regulation is actually a new piece of legislation that replaces the old building regulation, and the Residential Tenancies Act has been updated, so the delegations are purely just an update of what's already existing. It'll be sections of the Act, some new, what we can and can't do as a property manager with our community housing and things like that.
Thank you.
Any further questions or comments? I'd just like to refer to the legal implications if council don't get these decisions right. Delegations under legislation are required to facilitate effective outcomes, particularly in relation to issues requiring investigation by council officers. Some of these issues have the potential to result in future court action. So a technicality can cause a court action, and that's why we're delegating it to CEO to make sure that the operational matter is managed by the CEO, which is outlined in the Act. Any comments or further questions? Somebody move the recommendation, please. Moved by councillor Baines, seconded by councillor McLeod. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Ms Kerr. We move on to item 4.2, page 59, the RB1 budget review, and Ms Bradley will present this report. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, councillors. So this morning I have in front of you our RB1 budget review, which is our first review that we've done this financial year. So the purpose of the review is to promote sound financial management accountability, having each director and manager review in detail the components of our budget within their areas of responsibility. It's expected that going forward, only minor changes may occur between departments. However, this should not impact the overall budget at this stage. The capital budget in particular is addressed as part of this first budget review, and the report and appendices detail the final carryover figures for the financial year ending 30 June 21. The long-term financial plan has also been revised to incorporate future capital works for Port Hinchinbrook Sewage Treatment Plant with information available at this point in time, as well as landfill restorations and Mission Beach Master Plan. An item to note in the appendices, you will see there is an asterisk on our long-term financial plan. There is an issue with the new model that QTC has rolled out that we are working with them to resolve, but the issues are occurring in the 24-25 financial year, so the later years. So once we have that information, we can bring back to council any changes that may need to occur. But I feel like we broke their model, so they now have to review. A review of the operating budget has also identified some minor adjustments and phasing and reallocation of revenue and expenditure items between departments and programs. This is expected to have a nil effect on the original budget that we had adopted in June. So as part of the budget review process, several budget risks have been mitigated across the organisation, with some still outstanding, which we'll touch on later on this report. As part of the budget review process, however, there's still additional budget risks that will need to be monitored, as I mentioned, as we continue throughout the year. So firstly, the capital budget. So the budget review, as I mentioned, brings in the final carryover figures for 2021 financial year and recognises additional grant funding and associated expenditure that we've received or had acknowledgement of post our budget being adopted in June. So we've got appendices G and H, which cover the summary and the detail of the capital budget. So based on the proposed RB1 budget review figures, as at the 31st of October, Council has spent 18.33% of its revised budget, excluding commitments, and 35% including commitments. RB1 budget review analyses the current capital spend and budgets, which has resulted in the proposed reallocation of funds across programs as individual projects are identified throughout the year. So Council's original capital budget was estimated that carry forward figures would be 10.41 million. And to be included in capital works for the 21-22 year. Now that the review's been completed, we've been able to pull that apart in a lot more detail and take into consideration accruals, actual spend, additional grant funding that's been received, and Council's ability to deliver as well. So this has identified that the actual carryover figure needs to be increased by 746,000 to a total of 11.16 million, with an additional 3.1 million recognised as new capital. So this figure includes both carryover and savings from projects that have been reallocated across new projects in the revised budget, offset by projects that have been deferred to the 21-22 financial year. So the 3.1 million increase in the capital budget as new capital relates to mainly the DRFA Upper Darragee Road, recognition of 1.5 million grant funding, and from reserves. As well as McGowan Drive upgrade of 100,000. In facility space, we have transferred the Innerlinga Hall project to reserves, totalling 180,000, and grant funding for the aerodrome fencing has been received, so that's been recognised at 170,000. In the Chief Exec space, there's been some minor adjustments between capital projects, but nothing significant. Water and sewerage, we have increased the sewerage program and grant funding for Port Hinchinbrook Sewerage at 1.5 million based on the information we have on hand at this point in time. And Appendix H, as I mentioned, details all of that information and the movements across the capital budget by program. So the long-term financial plan attached as Appendix I has been updated to include the anticipated capital works for Port Hinchinbrook Sewerage, Mission Beach Master Plan, and the landfill restoration for various sites. So Council's considered various funding opportunities and options, including borrowings with favourable interest rates being able to be achieved at this point in time, as well as external and internal funding. So a loan of 1.55 million has been put into this budget for Port Hinchinbrook Sewerage, and a total of 2.75 million for the Mission Beach Master Plan has been factored into the long-term financial plan and is also reflected in Council's debt policy, which is also attached to this recommendation today as part of legislation. So Council will continue to review and update future capital requirements throughout the year, as well as asset management plans as we deliver our capital projects moving forward. So from an operating budget perspective, so the operating budget has been reviewed at the end of October, and the table that you see in your report highlights the current financial position as at 31 October against the revised budget. The reviews identified some minor adjustments of revenue and expenditure required between departments and programs, as well as recognition of additional grant funding and expenditure associated with that grant funding. It's expected that this will have a nil effect on the bottom line, as you'll see in this report from the original budget. So the key items to note from an operating perspective is net rates and utilities is currently under budget due to phasing of a change of the fire levy return. So we have moved that into our balance sheet. We recoup fire levy returns from our rates notices that we issue, and then we pay to Queensland Fire. So we've moved that to the balance sheet because it's a clear in and out transaction. So this can be seen in the full year budget reduction, offset by an increase in internal revenue relating to internal rates. So what we have done there is we have shifted our internal rates for councils' facilities that we own. Were previously recognised in net rates and utilities, and we've now shifted that into internal revenue line because it's an internal revenue generated by council. Fees and charges are currently tracking over budget, similar to what we discussed with the last report that came to council, with building fees up by 84,000, certificates up by 42,000, water and sewage up by 16,000, trade waste by 11, parking fees by 11, and offset by reduced meeting room revenue of 12,000. The full year budget has been increased to recognise additional camping fee revenue, offset by expenditure associated with that. Interest is currently under budget, predominantly due to our interest rates, tracking at around 50,000 under budget year to date, and this item will continue to be monitored as we progress, but we are expecting to see interest rates rise in the near future, so hopefully that will mitigate that risk for the rest of the financial year. Operating grants, currently under budget due to the timing of various grants to be received, including State Library Grant and Queensland Fire Risk Reductions Preparedness Grant. The full year budget has been increased to recognise grant funding of $491,000 for the Cardwell Mountain Bike Project, which you'll see the increase in operating grants and the increase in materials and services associated with that. Other revenue sources includes contributions to be transferred to a capital project. Once it's identified, the actual figures will reduce once that's transferred. Internal revenues under budget due to the delay in delivery of new waste plant that we have discussed previously. And the full year budget has increased due to that change in internal rates revenue, as we mentioned in point 1, offset by a reduction in those net rates and utilities. Year-to-date employee expenditures under budget due to the last 2 weeks of October wages being processed and posted at the time that this data was pulled from the system, as well as vacant positions either being unfilled or filled by contract labour. Materials and services under budget due to reduced fuel usage and maintenance expenditure year-to-date, as well as the timing of audit fees that have been issued, insurance savings, reduced contractor expenditure, as well as reduced chemical purchases across water, sewage and swimming pools, which may increase depending on how wet our wet season is. The full year budget has been increased in line with additional grant funding received, and also $100,000 has been factored in for operating the Cardwell Sewage Treatment Plant, which has been fully offset by a contribution from the state government that is expected. Depreciations currently tracking under budget due to the timing of our asset register roll, post-audit and capitalisations coming in across the business. Capital grants is over budget due to DRFA received for Upper Darity Road, received in October. And the full year budget has been increased due to new capital being recognised as detailed in Table A. Gain on asset disposal relates to sale of fleet items as well as freehold land that council has sold, offset by a loss on disposal due to the timing of completion of capital works, and the full year budget has been amended to include an estimated loss on disposal figure in line with current year capital budget. So we've introduced $7 million expected loss on disposal based on historical figures, which have been around the 10 to 8 million each financial year, just as a result of when we're replacing those or renewing those assets. Over the last 4 months, it's been noted some changes are required on a budget line item across various programs with council. So at this stage, there's no increase or decrease in the overall budget position, and all of these changes are detailed in Appendix E and F. So budget risks, as we're aware, these are identified and monitored throughout the year in our budget risk register. And their potential impact on council. So the current areas that are still flagged as budget risks include Port Hinchinbrook outstanding rates, as well as road and sewerage assets. asset rationalisation and depreciation, interest on investments, which hopefully we'll see that drop off as the year progresses, and NDRRA emergent work, so the timing of revenue recognised across those. So the resolution today, there's 2 points to it. One is to adopt the budget review and one also the debt policy. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms Bradley. Councillor Pervin.
Yeah, hello, Ms Bradley, morning. Just a couple of questions I've got in relation to your report there. Item 4.2, you talk about a loan of 1.5 million for Port Hinchinbrook Sewerage. Could you elaborate on this? What's this loan in relation to? I didn't think it was going to cost the ratepayers anything whatsoever.
Refer to the CEO.
Through the chair, look, thanks for the question. Look, the current budget estimate for Port Hinchinbrook is $14.3 million. So the current funding commitment from the state government and the invitation from federal government totals $12.3 million. Council's received a draft agreement from the state and provided an application for that federal funding. So that federal application does highlight that there's a gap there, that $14.3 million budget compared to our current funding that we're seeking of 12.3. So we are hoping to fund that shortfall through federal or state funding, but noting there's still some uncertainty around the final cost due to land acquisition and compensation, the procurement variability of the STP. We're not sure what that final cost for procurement of that STP will be. So the 1.5 borrowings is just a provision to fund the project with borrowings if external funding for the current budget is not there and not realised. But the intent would be that that principal and interest repayment would actually be incorporated into the service fee for residents. So council have resolved that the wider rate base would not be paying for the normalisation of a private development, and that would still be the case. But a report will be presented to council at LGM 9 December 2021 to provide all of that detail.
Okay, thank you.
So just to clarify, if a loan was required, it would be paid back by the benefited area. Yeah. Councillor Millwood.
So yes, through the chair, Ms Bradley, further to Nick's question, so are you actually asking us to approve the 1.55 million? Is that what you're asking us to approve today if we vote for this?
Through the chair, yes. The figures as they stand at the moment, based on the modelling, are included in this budget review, and the revised debt policy, I guess, indicates council's acceptance of progressing down that path based on any further information that might come up around Port Hinchinbrook.
Through the chair, there's a budget provision for that borrowings, but we have a current resolution of council that says we won't progress unless that federal funding is realised. So there is another item coming to council. So there's no commitment to progress with the project from council until that federal funding has been realised.
Any further questions for the officer?
Yeah, one more on that report as well. Just in relation to the capital budget, we're 18.38% through the capital budget. We're 6 months into our year. Why are we so far behind? Could I get a breakdown on that?
I'm, through the chair, happy to provide a response to that. So the report's October 2021, so we're effectively 33% through the financial year. So whilst that actual is 18.33%, that's the invoiced amount. So the actuals plus commitments in the report is actually at 35%. So that's invoice plus work that's been awarded with purchase orders issued. So that figure doesn't take into account some of the projects that were awarded at the LGM 11 November 2021, which we've been working through contract negotiations and execution currently. So that's the Stodders Hill landfill project, which was circa sort of $2 million. The Cowley Culverts project, which was circa $800,000, Barbed Wire Creek Bridge project, which is circa that sort of $1 million, and also the Mission Beach Transfer Station, which is sitting around that $900,000 to $1 million. So we are sitting in line, but I think as the report highlights, capital projects with the climate that we have here is always a risk for council. We would like to be further advanced in that, but we are tracking relatively well in consideration.
Okay.
And through the chair, just to add to what Mr. Graffin had said, that there is a capital budget report on this agenda as well, which will pull that apart a bit further with projects and where we're at with delivery.
Okay, thanks, Ms. Bradley.
Through the chair, just one other point on that matter. I guess the Mission Beach revitalisation project, but the Village Green was our largest capital project within the budget, and obviously the expenditure is budgeted fully, and with without realising that current funding through the Building Better Regions Fund, that is a large chunk of our capital project at the moment that Council will at a future date consider whether that's funded or a future application for that Building Better Regions Round 6 when that and if that's announced.
All right, thank you.
Any further questions or comments for the officer? If not, would somebody move the recommendation, please? Moved by Councillor McLeod, seconded by Councillor Baines. All in favour? Carried. Not, you're voting against, Councillor Millwood? Okay, so Councillor Pervin, Councillor Chewy, Councillor Barnes, Councillor McLeod, Councillor Baines, Nolan, for, and Councillor Millwood against. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Ms Bradley. We move on to item 5, asset sustainability, 5.1 page. You got a question?
No, just a statement. This is Miss Bradley's last meeting with us.
Oh, okay.
So I would like to acknowledge the work that she's done and the friendships that we've made, and thank her very much for everything with regards council and mentoring and helping me understand numbers. I appreciate it. I'm sure everybody else does, and we wish you all the very best in the future. Merry Christmas.
Yes.
Thank you.
Would any further councillors like to make a comment?
Yes, I would. I'd like to wish you all the best in your future at Airlie Beach, and might catch you up down there sometime. Thank you very much for everything you've done.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. It's been such a pleasure working with all of you and coming on this journey for those who are new in here and those who've been here for a couple terms. It's been a real pleasure working with you all, and I'll miss you tremendously. Thank you.
Thank you. We move on to item 5, asset sustainability, 5.1, page 87, the CCRC capital report, and Mr Sanders, I believe, would be presenting this report. No? David, is it? No, Mr McKee's. Oh, Mr McKee's presenting this report. Morning.
Good morning, Mr Mayor and councillors. So it's my pleasure to go through the status or update our capital works projects. The first thing is the program for this year's got 254 projects, total budget of 45.8 million. And as of the 15th of November, we've expended 19.1 million, which is about 42% of our deliverables. Projects completed since the last report, there's quite a number of them, but just a couple of highlights. Hatwell Park RV camping access works, regional reseal program, Wongling Beach Road renewal, Sugarcane Creek resheeting. That's a selection of them. I think these council would have already read these minutes as well. So yeah, that's about all I've got.
Any questions for the officer? If not, I'll.
Yes, sorry.
Yeah, Mr Goodman. Yep.
So just to add to that, and I guess being responsive to Councillor Pervin's concern earlier that the delivery of our capital works program, certainly the figures that we present in this report, which include up-to-date expenditure and commitments, are more impressive than the one from the finance. But recognising that commitments are often not delivered yet, and that's work that's still yet to occur on the ground. We are behind where we would ideally like to be in our capital works delivery, and that's something that we continue to look to improve on. With that in mind, there is a strategy that's been adopted in the operational plan this year to conduct an industry briefing and just about have that finalised for the 9th of December. That'll be held at the Mission Beach Resort. The intent of that industry briefing is to give contractors across the region a better idea of the capital works projects that we'll be looking to deliver externally in the second half of this financial year. So in addition to that, we'll be giving contractors a bit of an idea about how they can engage with council and the easiest way to get information on those contracts and also our expectations from contractors when they deliver projects for us. But we'll be delivering a bit of an idea for contractors for projects totalling in excess of $10 million at that briefing out of this capital works program. So I just wanted to provide that information to councillors.
Thanks for that, Mr. Goodman. Councillor Barnes.
Good, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to compliment Mr. Goodman on that last statement of the meeting that be organised for the 9th of December. That's something that's been badly needed for a very long time, and I think every contractor will be over the moon about that. And on page 90, are you confident that all these jobs will be completed and will be taken full advantage of government funding?
So page 90, you are referring to, just for the benefit of others, Councillor Barnes, is through the chair, those external funding sources that have deadlines for completion. The answer to that is, until those projects are delivered, there's always some risk, but there is particular focus in delivering those projects, and I'm pretty comfortable with how they sit at the moment. I know, if I can guess, one that you've got a particular interest in the TMR Tourism Balliol Street Cardwell, which has a completion deadline of June 2022. That project is actually due. There's signs up on at Balliol Street now, and construction due to start next week. That of interest to councillors. That's a project that we have tried to bundle a couple of times, gone out to the market a couple of times, and been dissatisfied with the costs that have come back, and we are going to deliver that by day labour, and current project estimate for that for day labour will deliver significant savings to council based on the tender prices we had received previously.
Thank you, Mr. Goodman. Councillor Norwood.
Yes, through the chair. Mr. Goodman, could you just advise the general public? So it's going to be at Mission Beach Resort on the 9th of December, the industry briefing. Okay, if anybody wants to get in contact with you about that, do they contact customer service or do they contact you?
Through the chair, there'll be a press release coming out in the very near future on that with an invitation to industry. I'll try to push out to our contractors that we regularly deal with a specific invitation to them so they don't miss it, but that will be going out and advertised widely in the very near future.
Any further questions? Councillor Pervin.
Just furthermore to Councillor Barnes, where he's asking about if those jobs will be completed. I noticed in the Upper Darragee Roads, it's fully completed now. We're just waiting for the final funding to be received, or is that absolutely finished now? Everything's completed.
That through the chair, that project is complete. That list on page 90 is just a complete list of those external funding within this financial year. So the Upper Darragee Road project is complete.
And it was delivered on time, so there's no risk there whatsoever.
The risk is now removed for that project. I would say the just to clarify, there is one small still outstanding risk in there, which is the compensation for compulsory acquisition of land. That particular issue has not been finalised yet, although we're quite confident that we have provided funding to that landowner based on our valuations. So the risk to the financial risk is only if a subsequent valuation comes in higher. We have ensured that the funding, external funding, is paid for the acquisition of land to the amount of the valuation that we have to date.
Thank you, Mr. Goodman. Any further questions for the officer? Just in relation to the contact with stakeholders, that comes on the back of pre-lodgement meetings that have been organised through Mr. Goodman's office, and that's been very well received by developers. Now he's reaching out to local contractors to walk them through the process to make sure they win plenty of our local work, local content. So again, engaging with the community, and we compliment you for that. Any further comments or questions? Would somebody move the recommendation, please? Moved by Councillor Barnes, seconded by Councillor Millwood. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
We move on to item 6, planning services, 6.1, page 100, application for reduction in infrastructure charges. And Mr. Jones and Mr. Horton will present the report.
Good morning, everyone.
Gentlemen.
Morning.
Morning, Council.
Item 6.1, Council. Council, item 6.1, 6.2 and 6.3 are very similar. So in the first report, I'll discuss the full report and identify the common areas for all three reports, and then in the second two, I'll simply provide unique details. So Council is in receipt of a request from Gilvia Planning on behalf of Clifford Road Investments for 100% reduction in infrastructure charges relating to a material change of use for a dual occupancy situated on land at 44 Campbell Street, Tully. The application was approved by Council via delegated authority, subject to conditions, with infrastructure charges notice being issued on the 2nd of September 2021 for the amount of $12,574.05. The proposed development is for a dual occupancy on land within the township zone, Tully Residential Precinct, which meets the criteria for eligible development outlined within the policy. The development has demonstrated that it will provide economic benefit to the Tully Township. Proposed development will provide for employment opportunities during the construction phase and support local businesses and services after construction. The proposed development will utilise existing council services, including water, sewer, roads and stormwater. A 100% reduction in the infrastructure charges for the development would result in a $12,574.05 discount. It is recommended that the request for a 100% reduction in infrastructure charges be approved by Council, provided the development is completed prior to 30th September 2024. Happy to answer any questions, Council.
Any questions for the officer? Councillor Pervin.
Thanks, Mr. Jones. So these properties in particular are actually properties that Council has sold or in the process of selling that we previously own, aren't they? Is that correct? Do you know?
Through the council, through the chair, Councillor Pervin, that's correct. So,
and we've got a shortage of house livability for people to live in at the moment, and dual occupancy, whether they be a duplex, a triplex, or just multiple units. I think it's a great way forward for the to increase our potential number of homes in this district. I'm in favour of this, and I'll be giving it my full support, and especially as I know the phone calls that I receive as a councillor, people have no homes, no houses to live in. I think this is a great way forward, and also just an increase to our general rates revenue as well. You're going from a single property to a dual occupancy property, it increases our rates. It's within a benefited area of our existing Tully area. So this has got my 100% support, and I hope the other councillors follow through with me on this as well. I'd like to move the motion when it comes to it.
Thank you,
Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Pervin. Councillor Pervin's moved the motion. Any further? Well, have we got a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Barnes. Any further comments or questions, councillors? I just want to talk about the housing crisis in general and support Councillor Pervin. We've just finished 3 days of delegations with federal ministers, senators, shadow ministers, and housing crisis was in the top 3 of every forum. In fact, Michael Sukkar, the Federal Housing Minister, has recommended a regional housing strategy to address the issue, particularly here in North Queensland. And one of the senators made a comment that the feds collect the taxes, the state has all the power, and local government's left with the problem. And here we are today dealing with the problem. So I agree with Councillor Pervin. This policy that we adopted a few years ago is now doing what we planned and what it was intended, and it's going to deliver roofs over people's heads. We know how many people are ringing us up about renters who are being kicked out. It's good for the economy with southern escapees escaping COVID buying homes, but renters are now living in their cars or on the street. And this is one way of doing our bit, working with state and federal government, if you like, to deliver great outcomes. Are there any further, Councillor Millwood?
Yeah, through the chair, I also agree that it'll be a great economic driver for the area and will have the potential to bring more families or couples to town, so it'll be good. Thank you.
Councillor Baines.
I'm B1. Thanks, B2. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, I think an important part of this, and we talk to this every time, this is about targeted infill. We've got significant infrastructure within our IPA areas in the region, and if we can target this sort of construction going on, that we're not increasing any burden on by putting more infrastructure in place. We also have the ability to make sure we don't get into a sprawl as we're starting to expand, which will only, again, be a demand for more infrastructure. So I see great value in these prospects. We know that the population is going to rise, and it is. Those avenues are coming, and for the planning department and this organisation to target our existing infrastructure and get that infill in place, I can only commend Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Baines. Any further comments or questions? We've had a mover in Councillor Pervin, seconded by Councillor Barnes. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. We move on to item 6.2, page 104, application for reduction in infrastructure charges.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So Council is in receipt of a request from Gilwell Planning on behalf of Clifford Road Investments for a 100% reduction in infrastructure charges relating to a material change of use for a dual occupancy on land situated at 42 Campbell Street, Tully. The application was approved by Council by delegated authority subject to conditions on the 31st of August 2021, with the infrastructure charges notice being issued on the 2nd of September 2021 for the amount of $12,574.05. The proposed development meets the criteria for eligible development, and the proposed development is also demonstrated to provide economic benefits to Tully. It is recommended that the request for 100% reduction in infrastructure charges be approved by Council, provided the development is completed prior to 30 September 2024. Happy to answer any questions, Council.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Any questions? Councillor Chewy, a move. Councillor Chewy, seconded by Councillor McLeod. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Move on to item 6.3, page 108, application for reduction in infrastructure charges. Mr. Jones.
Thanks, Council. I'll go again on this one. Hopefully I'll get it third time right. So once again, Council has received a request for a Gilwell Planning on behalf of Clifford Road Investments for a 100% reduction in infrastructure charges relating to a dual occupancy on land situated at 46 Campbell Street, Tully. The application was approved by Council by delegated authority subject to conditions on the 31st of August 2021, with infrastructure charges notice being issued on the 2nd of September 2021 for the amount of $12,574.05. Proposed development meets the criteria for eligible development outlined within the policy. It is recommended that the request for a 100% reduction in infrastructure charges be approved by Council, provided the development is completed prior to 30 September 2024.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Any questions for the officer? Moved by Councillor Chewy, seconded by Councillor Pervin. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. We move on to item 6.4, delegation report, and Mr. Horton's going to present this report.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Morning, Council. Delegations report for the month of October, Council, leading into the end of the year, Christmas. Council, our total planning approvals for the month was 15, a little bit below 2020-21, which was 18, which is pretty consistent, not too far. We're 5 behind from last year. We've done 76 this year to 81 last year in planning, so we're pretty consistent on where we were in that sort of area previous year. In the building stats, Council, We're at 44 for the overall 5-year progress comparison from 2017 to now. We're 44 above the highest, which was 2018, Council, on approvals that we've done with dwelling approvals, Class 1As. 5-year comparison of total approvals, Council, we're 82 above 2020, which we're moving nicely at the end of October. So, yeah, the growth there continues to grow, Council, which is nice to see. Overall, we dropped a little bit in the monthly approvals. We had 35 last month. The month before in September, we had 54. Still having overall approvals of 5.3 million, which was actually higher than the costings at the total figure for the month before, even though we had 54 the month before. The estimated costs around that were 4.4, so we had 35 with a lot more costs on estimated costs on the building that was being approved, so 5.3 there, Council. Overall, total approvals, the dollar figure, 57.3 million so far to October in total value, and dwellings in Class 1s, 37.7 million, Council, in estimated costs, which is a nice figure to see. I suppose the biggest one for ourselves, as well, is our record, the searches that the organisation's doing. And this is only for us in planning services. I know rates would probably be the same in what they deal with, but we're 148 above our total in 2019 and 151 above last year. So overall, we got 448 searches that we've done. Closest we've done previously was 300. So Council, that continues to rise at the end of October. So there is some interest in the area, and we hope that continues. And I'm sure you're fully aware of that, but happy to answer any other questions, Council.
Thank you, Mr. Horton. Any questions for the officer? Just a matter that's related to building stats is the cost of insurance, and I was pleasantly surprised this week when I got some quotes. A particular insurance company is now offering a 30% discount if you can produce a Form 16, which is a definition of a new roof being fitted, and if you produce a Form 16 from Council office, you get a 30% discount in your insurance. So just be aware of that next time your insurance is due, and if you've had work done on your roof, they're now reflecting that in their premiums, which is great news. Are there no further questions for the officers? Somebody move the recommendation, please. Moved by Councillor Pervin, seconded by Councillor Millwood. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. We move on to item 7, organisational cultural development. Item 7.1, page 125, crew by function, and Mr. Crosby, the Manager of People and Culture, will present this report.
Good morning.
Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Morning,
Good morning,
Mr. Crosby.
councillors. The crew by function report you have before you, I won't go into detail this morning. In relation to the content of the report, I think we have discussed this several times with council, so I know that you will be across the detail of the report. What I would like to point out, however, in respect of the report, is that our consultation and engagement has continued with the workforce around the details that this report refers to. And that has been up until the last few weeks, in fact. So what we did do in respect of that is provided the opportunity for further question and answer sessions right across the asset maintenance workforce that are involved with these changes. And what we did see with that sort of engagement was that there was overwhelming show of hands at those meetings to say that employees are in support of what is proposed with the crew by function approach. What I'd also like to point out is that this has been a really open process with employees, and it has gone above and beyond our technical requirements for consultation that exist under the certified agreement. So with this change that is proposed, there are no changes that meet the definition of what we call significant effect in the certified agreement. And what this has really been about is to really ensure that there's engagement and bringing employees along on the so that they do understand what is proposed in terms of making any change and or how that can benefit them, as well as operational efficiency, which then of course flows on to the community. So we really have gone above and beyond in terms of our engagement with the workforce around this particular matter. So what the recommendation is for today is to, there's three that are there, and that is for that council note for information the changes to reorganise the asset maintenance organisation along functional lines, to recognise the service, employee development and job satisfaction opportunities, and also financial benefits that will arise from this proposed change, and then finally delegating authority to the CEO to ensure that amendments to the budget are reflected in the next budget review. So,
thank you, Mr. Crosby. Any questions? Councillor Millwood.
Yeah, through the chair, I've got a few comments to make. First of all, the crew by function relates to our asset maintenance sector, and without this very important part of our team, the wheels would not turn. I thank you for your timeless hours put into developing this new system. So out of the asset maintenance section, approximately 114 staff, only 69 attended the question and answer sessions held by the crew by function. You're now proposing a new system, but will this system extend the amount of employees, and will it extend the amount of employees that we have on the ground? And if not, how will this help council improve our service levels?
I can take that. Yeah, thank you. Through the chair. Just in relation to the number of employees that have attended, that is correct. That number of 69 that attended in the most recent engagement question and answer sessions. Remembering that this matter has extended over several months, and in fact from approximately April this year. And during that time, it is fair to say that all employees within the asset maintenance section have been consulted and also informed around what is proposed with these changes. So we take it that with the recent attendance of around 69 employees, that it was clear to employees what is proposed in respect of change. And we have also met with the Joint Consultative Committee on Thursday of last week, and the indication there at the Joint Consultative Committee was that overwhelmingly employees were providing feedback to their representatives as well, that they're on board, they're in agreement with this proposed change.
So does this extend the amount of employees we'll have on the ground?
So in terms of what is proposed initially through this particular proposal here, that does not propose for additional numbers immediately as a result of this report. However, what was discussed at the Joint Consultative Committee last Thursday was that we will take a zero-based budgeting approach to really look at what is required in terms of labour on the ground to then execute service delivery. And so with that, that will build a case for what numbers are required on the ground. And if that does mean that there are additional numbers, then certainly from a leadership perspective, we would put forward proposal around that.
Or we would make sure that all the vacant positions are filled.
That was one of the other matters that was discussed also at the Joint Consultative Committee last week, is that we recognise that there are vacancies that remain, and our commitment is to ensure that those vacancies are filled, yes.
Okay, we leave only we have comments only from 7 people, and for me this does not tell me change is supported by the majority. Although in its entirety I feel the crew by function idea is good, but I need a surety that this will be beneficial to our workforce and our ratepayers. I'm not completely sold on this plan, as I was promised savings from the takeover of the transfer stations that I have not yet seen to this point, and I would like to make, and at this point, that's where it stands for me, so.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Barnes.
Good. Yes, through the chair, Mr. Crosby, I can't really agree fully with a lot of the statements that I've read in this article. Like, we already have a lot of these suggestions in our workforce when it comes to multi-skilling. We're already experiencing it. The last thing we need is more bosses. We need more workers on the ground. We have gangers really now with no one to gang. From the year 2016 to the year 2021, we have a lot less workers outside and a lot more inside. Unions, I know, are in favour of this concept to a certain degree, but their problem is the same as mine. Who's going to do the work? And I don't know if this is being pushed through because we've got an enterprise bargaining system just around the corner. And also in my reading of this project, I read that we're going to be using a lot more project managers. So this makes me think we may be able to save some upper jobs if we're going to use project managers for a lot of jobs. And maybe that savings may be able to be spread across the weekly take-home pay packet of a lot of our workers. Because if you want to keep workers, you increase their pay packet, you give them unlimited overtime, and well, that's what mines do. And I think we could take a little leaf out of their book and try and look after our workers a lot more. So we're lucky to have such a great lot of workers, and I'd like to be keeping them very happy and with proper planning and design give job satisfaction. So I think we need less behind the screens and more on site. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barnes. I think the other part of the argument is about our ageing workforce. There's a young sector that want opportunity. They don't want to be labourers for the rest of their life. And this program will deliver opportunities for that sector. When this matter was raised at a Mission Beach Community Association meeting about 6 months ago, a council employee stayed back and approached Councillor Chewy. I was within earshot, and he pleaded with councillors to get on with it and get this across the line. The vast majority of the workforce want it. There might be a small sector that anti, but at the end of the day, I'm in favour of giving our younger sector an opportunity, and that's what this program does. You know, it's all about bargaining in good faith. It's all right to have all the consultation in the world and say, yeah, we support it, and then start ringing councillors to undermine it. And I think that's what's been happening. So I'm keen to see this get across the line today. It's been deferred once, and I'm now moving the recommendation. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Chewy seconds. Are there any further speakers? Councillor Millwood.
Yes, through the chair. I'd actually like to make an amendment to the motion. I'd like to request that the Chief Executive Officer I get tongue-tied every time I say it, to undertake a zero-based resource budget for the Delivery Services Asset Maintenance Department to inform the 2022-2023 budget. My reason for the amendment is that the zero-based approach to resource budgeting will inform the human resource requirements to deliver the current level of service across the newly created functions within this department.
Very well worded and a lot of common sense. I'll second the amendment. Do we have any further speakers? We'll go back to the mover. Would you like to speak to your amendment?
No, I'm happy to.
You're happy to?
Yeah.
And I've already said my bit about why I think this is a great move forward for the restructure of our workforce. So with those few words, can I put it to the vote in favour of the amendment? That's unanimous. The amended motion now becomes a substantive motion. All in favour of the substantive motion? Councillor Barnes, you're voting against. Okay, so it's Councillor McLeod, Councillor Barnes, Councillor Millwood, Councillor Nolan, Councillor Pervin, Councillor Chewy in favour, and Councillor Barnes is against. Okay, thank you. Carried. We move on to general business. Thank you, Mr. Crosby. We move on to general business. Councillor Pervin.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. CEO, I've got a couple of things I'd like to discuss with you, and maybe you can give me some information. First of all, our vaccination rates for the Cassowary Coast region, would you be able to give us a update on what the current vaccination rates are, how we're tracking in relation to other areas surrounding us?
Through the chair, thanks for the question. Our current vaccination rates that have been published are sitting around 83% for a first dose of those available, and sitting at around 68.3% for fully vaccinated.
We're tracking relatively good compared to neighbouring shires, aren't we?
I think Far North Queensland is tracking reasonably well in relation to the state. But yeah, we are at the moment tracking on par or aligned with most of our neighbours, including Cairns.
All right, thank you very much. And just one more thing, Mr. CEO, thanks for that information. I've had a few phone calls in relation to operational hours of our transfer station, and particularly Stodders Hill. I know when we took over the transfer stations, times were adjusted. Is there any chance we could get a review of the operating hours of Stodders Hill transfer station? I've had quite a fair few people ring me up, especially in relation to the closing time. They can't get there on time, and it's a bit of an issue for them, especially businesses in particular that are forced to stop work at 2:30, 3 o'clock to be there by 4 o'clock. Would you be able to undertake a review of these operating hours?
Through the chair, we can take the question on notice and engage with our delivery services team to understand what those challenges are and come back to council.
Yeah, I'd like to support Councillor Pervin on that review. Constructive criticism is out there from the business sector. That is great that council has taken the initiative and taken over the transfer stations, but you've got to run it like a business like we run ours, and their business hours are 8 to 5, and that 5 o'clock knock-off is critical to them. So I support a review of that adjustment late in the day from 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock, absolutely. Are there any further general business items? Councillor Milbury?
Yeah, no, through the chair, just to the comments that were made by Councillor Pervin, there's actually you'll see a detailed email there on the stats of COVID that we received this morning, if you want to dig into it further. And I also agree with the review on the hours at Stodders Hill. I think that'd be great.
Thank you, Councillor Milbury. Councillor Chewy?
Thank you. Yeah, through the chair, just touching on the irreverent. I mean, some of us were lucky enough to go down to the set the other day when it was amazing to look at the work that's been done. I believe it's wrapped up now. I think the bar down the Wongaling Mission Beach is sadly gone. And so my question to the CEO or Mr. Goodman, I'm not sure who can respond to these questions. Has the set, I haven't driven past, I should know, but I haven't, when the set is removed, if it hasn't already, will the area, be left back as it was? And do we know if they're likely to come back? And I know when they spoke to us, they were very grateful and appreciative of the work that council's done and community's done, and they loved being here. It got a little bit hot towards the end, so they'd like to come again when it's cooler. But yeah, I'm just wondering about the actual the set that they've used, whether that's going to be able to return to the way that it was found. Thank you.
Mr. Goodman.
Through the chair, the production team is a little tight-lipped on some of the information on this on Irreverent, but I can provide the following information. Irreverent has finished filming within the Cassowary Coast Regional Council area. That was on the 20th of November. They're now heading to South East Queensland to do the studio filming portion. Local contractors will be engaged by Irreverent to remove the set that's on site and restore the sites to the original condition. They're responsible for reinstallation of the playground and pergola, and council holds a bond. If that was not done to our satisfaction, we can undertake additional works. In terms of the materials, some of the materials have gone down to South East Queensland for the studio filming portion. Some have gone into storage, and some materials have been donated to local not-for-profits. I think we can confidently say that the production team have been extremely happy with both the community at Mission Beach and the interactions with council. So decisions will be made by others, but clear indication from the team that was working down there that they'd love to come back. So it was very good success, I think, so far.
Yeah, well, shout out to your team, and I think Nicole worked very hard with them to ensure it ran smoothly. So congratulations, and we hope they come back, and maybe there's more movie stars circulating locally that were extras that might get signed up. Do we have any idea of the dollar spend that was generated within our region?
Through the chair, I certainly would like to acknowledge Nicole Spooner and the work she's done, but she would be the first to recognise that she's only been a facilitator for a whole number of people across the organisation that have made a significant contribution to facilitating the filming across the region. At you know, the team down there acknowledge that they are they're high maintenance. Nicole has been able to facilitate quick responses by many areas of this organisation, and certainly hasn't been, and Nicole would be the first to admit, it hasn't been something that she has done by herself, and certainly not just within the infrastructure services team. Sorry, I've got dollars spent. We have asked for that information. At this time, the producers haven't provided us with that. But if you look at the just the number of vans that are parked across the road from the filming site, the amount of accommodation that's been utilised, the catering that's been done, very significant expenditure in our region. Anecdotally, we hear that some of the cast were so impressed with the location that they've bought houses at Mission Beach. So that's a great indication of how they viewed our community.
Thank you, Mr. Goodman. I'd just like to add that while the main set production was at Mission Beach, it did travel around the whole of the Cassowary coast, which was great. So we look forward to seeing that on television and shining a light on Cassowary Coast, one coast.
Thank you, Councillor Chewy. Councillor Barnes and Councillor
Through the chair, I'd just like to let the general public know a very contentious issue is the current mandate for vaccinations. Council has been in deep discussion on our stance, and we were ready to make a statement, but due to one point, we are still preparing our position. Would that be right, Mr. Mayor?
Very accurate comment, Councillor Barnes. We're not ready to make a public statement on this matter. It's a very sensitive issue, and we're working in tandem with Queensland Health to make sure we get the wording right, but that will come shortly. But at the moment, we're working it through carefully. Thank you. Any further general business? Councillor Millwood?
No, through the chair, I was just going to let Mr. Goodman know that Councillor Baines and I could appreciate the comment of high maintenance as we worked on the set of Sea Patrol for quite a few seasons, didn't we?
Absolutely. Any further general, Councillor Baines?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have a small item of general business, Mr. Chair. Mr. Herb Late, as many people within our region, is well known to the Innisfail community in particular, but Cassowary Coast as a whole. Herb was on the council for many years back in the Johnson Shire, and Herb has produced a life story piece that he has had gone into print now. There's some late family history and events, and there's a lot of council history in this book, some fantastic photos, some great history on the region. And Mr. Late has given me a copy and asked me to present it to the CEO so that he may take charge of this book for the people of the Cassowary Coast, and we get a copy in the library. So if anyone wants to have a look, A bit of a plug for Mr. Late. He is selling books, so if anyone wants to buy one, they can get in contact. Mayor and myself have purchased one. Yep. There's some great history in here. So, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to take the opportunity to present the life story, Herb W. Late, better late than never, which I think is a great idea, and I recommend it to everyone. And this, I believe, will be available at the Innisfail Library initially, and probably do a tour. So with your indulgence, Mr. Mayor, I'll present this to the CEO.
Yep, absolutely. Yep. Just a comment about Herb and his life in business and politics. Purchased our home in 1974 from Herb Late Real Estate. He also got a bit of money out because he was a local bookmaker. He was a Shire chairman, and he's an absolute walking encyclopedia on politics. If you want to sit down and talk about both sides of the ledger, red and blue, Herb's the man to talk to. And I purchased one of those books. Councillor Barnes.
Good, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Lastly, our CEO did a detail on the STP. This week we've been discussing the dredging. What's the latest there, Andrew?
Through the chair, the latest on the 1.5 million that has been put forward by the federal government for dredging of 1 Mile Creek is still in negotiation. So officers have met with officers from both Senator McDonald's office and also from the Deputy Prime Minister's office to continue to negotiate the finer terms of that agreement, in particular in relation to the ongoing maintenance requirement that agreement proposes. We intend to provide a more detailed update in the item updating Council on Port Hinchinbrook and all matters Port Hinchinbrook at the LGM 9 December 2021.
You happy with that response? Councillor Barnes, yeah? Any further, Councillor Baines?
Well, one more, Mr. Mayor, and probably just a bit of a shout out to remind the community that on the 5th of December, Sunday, in Innisfail, the 3 Combat Support Battalion will be in town with 400 plus of their personnel and quite a bit of their machinery, I understand, that's coming in town which should be quite impressive, and they're exercising their freedom of the city that was given to them by the Johnson Shire Council post their reconstruction efforts after Cyclone Larry. So I would just encourage as many of the community as possible to come out and have a look at this very, very impressive Combat Support Battalion that will be in town. I do believe the march begins at Anzac Park. I think it's around 5. Yeah, so if we've got people can be there and support this wonderful arm of the Australian Defence Force, it'd be fantastic to see. So, thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Baines. Any further general business? Just want to give a further update on the 3-day mayoral conference with federal ministers, senators and shadow ministers. I mentioned before the housing crisis was in the top 3. The other critical issues that were raised was the regional plan. While it's a state issue, all the federal counterparts understood that the plan is stymieing development at the moment, particularly in the Douglas Shire, Cassowary Coast. Southern investors want to do a lot of stuff, and while we might be putting a new planning scheme together, it's going to be handicapped by the current regional plan. So 13 years on, all the mayors collectively have called on their federal people to put pressure on the state to allow a review of the regional plan. Also had the opportunity to talk to Chief of Staff Mr. Craig McLaughlin. He's Chief of Staff for Minister Peter Dutton to put the MSF proposal about the land behind Cowley Beach, which they're keen to open up for sugarcane for their viability going forward. So the CEO has communicated that to MSF, and they're very appreciative that Council's gone into bat for them on that particular issue that they raised with us when we did our tour of the mill about 2 weeks ago. The other critical issue is Kurrama Range Road, and the interesting approach now is that they're not looking at upgrading Kurranda Range Road, not Kurrama Range Road, sorry. Coranda Range Road, they're looking at a second route, and that is the old bridle track. It's described as the bridle track. So the federal ministers were particularly interested, so were the senators, and I believe there's a huge appetite now to look at a feasibility study of a second route called the bridle track from Cairns to Mareeba. The other one that the CEO asked me to raise was the digital connectivity, black spots. We've got a number of them in Cassowary Coast. Surprisingly, there are a lot of black spots across the far north, and the relevant ministers and senators also took that on board. And I just want to talk about the housing crisis, because it was raised by every mayor. Every sector in North Queensland been affected by this. And some of the councillors attended an AGM the other night of the Innisfail Youth and Family Care. Now, that facility was set up primarily for domestic violence victims many years ago. I think it was 1991. But of late, it's people that are homeless that are knocking on their door looking for a roof over their head. And the CEO delivered an excellent report about the current state of play, but I want to read one paragraph in particular. Information from the ABC Without a Home project indicates that homelessness is on the rise in Australia. More than 30% of people without a home live in 20 of the nation's 329 regions, as defined by the Australian Bureau of Statistics. The average homelessness rate in these regions is nearly 12 times the national average. 12 times the national average. The Cassowary Coast, Innisfail, sits at number 12 in the top 20 regions for homelessness. So it's pretty scary stuff, and you wonder why you're getting frequent phone calls from people saying, the house I'm renting has been sold, I'm now living in my car, can council help us out? That's why it's been elevated. It's a good cop, bad cop story. Southern investors are buying up lots of property up here. It's great for our economy, but the social aspect of it is that many of the renters are now finding themselves on the street, or if they're lucky enough, they can live in a car. But as you know, that's right across the far north, and every mayor spoke to the federal ministers, the shadow ministers, and the senators about that issue in their top three challenges. Are there any further general? Yes, Councillor Millwood.
Yeah, so through the chair, so Mr Mayor, maybe that gives council an opportunity to talk about a new business model for maybe some sustainable housing in the area. But anyway, further to that, I attended a 2-day LawMac conference in Airlie Beach over the weekend, and most of the conversation was about reducing waste to landfill. There's some new programs coming online, like the new battery stewardship, which comes online, I think, the 5th of December, which is quite interesting. There was talks about how we do garbage collection, FOGO and composting, and I must commend Mr Hammond for a fantastic presentation on behalf of Cassowary Coast Regional Council on the automation of 2 of our sites, and it was very well received. So yeah, I take it that we're going to receive quite a few phone calls about how, when, where, what to do, and yeah, so we can just keep monitoring that as we go. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Millwood. Any further general business? If not, we now move on to item 9, which is confidential. 9.1, page 163, a legal matters update, and that's the reason why I'm now closing the meeting to the public. All good, Daniel? Sorry. Moved by Councillor Baines, seconded by Councillor Barnes. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, councillors and staff, we'll reopen the meeting to the public. Would somebody move that we do so? Moved by Councillor Pervin, seconded by Councillor McLeod. All in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. And I'll hand over to Mr. Graffin, who will present the report, Legal Matters Update, item 9.1, page 163.
Thank you. Through the chair, item 9.1 covers the Cassowary Coast Regional Council local government meeting on the 14th of October, a request from the Mayor to provide a report in regards to all legal matters that are currently afoot. This report is an update for Council on those matters, provides detail around the chronology of those matters and current expenses. This report does exclude matters relating to accounts receivable, collections and planning matters. I do need to note the officer's recommendation for this report has been amended slightly, and those amendments relate to recommendation number 2, which has been amended to reflect that note that a decision has been handed down in bankruptcy matter BRG 337-2019. An appeal to the decision has been lodged by the respondents, and Council has adopted the model litigant principles and is opposing the appeal proceedings and requests the Chief Executive Officer to action a security of costs application. The other amendment is the addition of item 6, which is request the Chief Executive Officer provide an update to Council on items 2, 3 and 4 at the next local government meeting scheduled for 9 December 2021.
Thank you, Mr. Graffin. Any questions, councillors? If not, would somebody move the recommendation, please? It's moved by Councillor Baines, seconded by seconded by myself. All in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. That brings our meeting to a close, effective 11:25. Thanks, everybody.